All right.
Are Sean and David coming?
I thought so. Or
Virtually,
hold on.
he'll be with us virtually.
Okay.
I told him around 5:30 because I figured we'd probably do the calendar stuff first.
Okay.
Thought there might be public comments and didn't want to have, parents or others waiting.
Good point.
I think we lost
No,
Amy.
she's not going to be here. Close there. If I didn't say that before, I meant to. I like your mask.
See if Amy can get back on.
Yep.
There she is. Okay.
Sorry.
So it's November 5th.
Are we on?
So thought we were on.
Yeah.
Keep going on. Okay, we're going on now, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's November 5th, 2020. We're here for primarily a school budget workshop on the budget. We're also going to talk a little bit about the calendar, proposed calendar change, and board goals for next year. Call the meeting to order.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin the meeting with any folks are here or online to join us. I don't see anybody in the, I didn't receive any written comments to read in. So is there anybody online who would like to make public comment?
Did Karen want to make a comment, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know. Karen, are you?
Hi, it's Karen.
Yeah.
Paul Zanetti, 8 Stonewall Way. So I necessarily had a comment to make. I thought I just couldn't figure out how to listen to it, so I apologize. But since I am on, I will say I just want to thank all of you guys for all the time and effort you guys have put into trying to figure out the right calendar and the right schedule for the kids. But on top of that, just keeping the kids, the students, and the staff as safe as you possibly can. I know this is all a new time for all of us. And, maybe every answer hasn't been perfect, to some people, but I think you guys are doing a great job. And I just wanted to make that comment. So thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Any other comment? Looks like nobody else is online. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's talk. Dr. Gibbons talked about the calendar changes. Susan, do you have any updates on the survey that went out?
I do, and I put together a little slideshow, so I'm going to pull that up now. Can somebody just let me know if you can see this okay?
We can.
You cannot or can?
We can. We can see it.
Okay. Yay. Okay. So wanted to take a few minutes tonight to review some of the data that we have available to share around the planning for the rest of the school year to the extent that we're able to do so. As you know, we started this whole process of planning the school year with two primary goals in mind. The first was to support the social and emotional and physical well-being of our learning community, with safety being the highest priority. So all of our decisions had centered around safety first and providing the quality learning experiences for our students to think. So to do this, lots of work has gone into figuring out the safety piece and how can we improve teaching and learning for our kids based on what we learned at the end of our experience in the spring. And we put a lot of time and effort into trying to improve upon both remote learning and on-campus learning in our new COVID environment. So, again, I do want to give a shout out to the administrative team who has worked incredibly hard daily to continue to offer 3 models of learning to kids, and certainly the board, the parents, the teachers, all the staff members have just, been so flexible and just gone above and beyond in all kinds of ways on behalf of the kids and the families in the community. So have to give a shout out one more time to all of those folks who have devoted themselves literally to making this happen. So to provide quality learning, there's many components, not just the 4 that are listed here, but some really important parts of making that happen are to find every way possible to maximize the contact time between highly qualified teachers and students. So we all know, and I think community-wide, no matter if you're a parent, a student, a teacher, a board member, that we all believe that the best way to deliver teaching and learning experiences is face-to-face. So, and there's lots of research that bears that out as well. And in order to be able to provide quality learning experiences, a tremendous amount of planning and preparation go on behind the scenes just to be able to deliver instruction to kids. And once we get in the trenches and we are teaching kids, we have to see, hey, did we land? We need to do a little formative assessment or periodic summative assessments to be able to see if kids are learning what it is we're intending them to learn. And when we get the results of that, of course, we reflect, we take time to reflect and see what's landing with children, and then we make modifications and we start our cycle over. And really, the part that's student facing is enormously important. But what happens behind the scenes in order to make that happen is equally as important to delivering a quality learning experience for kids. So that is a component when we think about planning and our calendar and all the structures that go into being able to enable this to happen. It gets increasingly complex. Another aspect of quality learning experiences for kids comes from setting expectations and routines. So one of the things that we do at the beginning of the year, and certainly as kids are just even transitioning into school, is socialization. We socialize them into what our expectations are. And once you can establish expectations and routines, then you can move forward at a much more in the learning continuum for kids. Because once they know, I come in the morning and, we're going to have a period of time that we're going to, have to get ourselves acclimated, and then we're going to go over the objectives for the day, and then we're going to start our various learning routines. Then you don't have to be having conversations around that. So setting these expectations is a huge part of creating the conditions for kids to learn. And then, of course, the engagement piece. Students like to be active, hands-on, minds-on. We all know the saying that you can give somebody a fish and they'll eat for a day, and you can teach them to fish, and then they can eat for a lifetime. And so engagement is about the doing as opposed to, the actual event itself. So I thought it was important that we start the conversation reminding ourselves what these, I apologize, I've got two phones and one of them's ringing, so I'm going to take a moment to turn that off. It's the conundrum. You put it on silent and you don't hear it, and you take off silence and you hear it. So the next slide really is about why we're even having, kind of the conversation right here and right now, and what is the challenge? There's several layers to the challenge, but the staffing is really what is driving what we can and can't do at this point. So we started the year offering on-campus and remote learning, and 80% of our families are participating in on-campus and about 20% in remote. But then there's this whole other category that we really didn't realize the degree to which it would impact a teacher's day and the learning experience for kids. And this is the number of students that we're supporting who are either in isolation because they've had COVID, or somebody in their family has had COVID and they're being quarantined. So I call this category independent learning for students because they're not on campus and they're not remote. Our remote classes are set for the year. The sections at the high school are at different places in their curriculum. So you can't just pop a student in and pop a student out. It's not as simple as that. For kids that are on campus, they're not able to access any live instruction, and so teachers have to put together resources and materials for them. Certainly they can post things online so that the asynchronous part can happen, but then teachers then have to find ways outside their school day in order to also support those kids that are learning who are in quarantine. So we've known from the beginning of this school year that more staff are required to offer this program, and we've done an awful lot to be able to get at least the minimum number of staff in place to support on-campus learning and remote learning. So we are understaffed, and not just understaffed in support service areas that talked frequently about, but at our last meeting we also talked a lot about how few subs we have. And so right now we only have 2 substitutes at the elementary school, and we don't have any substitutes at the junior senior high school. So understaffed, and administration, and we're moving paraprofessionals from where their assigned areas are around to cover just to get through the day. Once we have added absences to that, then we don't have the wherewithal to keep our schools open. And that was the reason why we had to go remote at the junior senior high school on Monday, because we don't have enough people to be able to provide coverage just to have our classrooms be open. Never mind, will those learning experiences be quality ones for our kids. So that's layer 1. Layer 1 is that we don't have enough staff to keep us going, and flu season is becoming more and more active. And we know, and we shared this information back in July, that it could be that when flu season comes, that operationally we won't be able to keep our schools open. And so we're here now. It's November, and you can see this is a chart from the CDC that provides information about what that cycle has been over the last 20 years. So This is what flu activity looks like. And we know that in December, after Thanksgiving, after people go outside of their usual group of, their bubble, as we say, that germs get transferred, and then kids come back to school and teachers come back to school, and those germs incubate over that period of time, and then we start seeing more and more absences. And so, in December, this activity, is increased, and it continues through January, peaking in a very significant way in February, and then starting to decline a little bit in March. So this is what a typical flu cycle looks like for us. And as I've said, I've been in the field over 30 years, and we always see attendance shifts, when flu season's upon us. So this is what our attendance looked like last year. Now, last year, of course, we had fewer staff because we didn't have remote teachers as well as on-campus teachers. Of course, we've added multiple staff members at the senior to improve our programming there. And so this is with fewer staff, but this shows you what our attendance looked like after Thanksgiving. So this is the average daily attendance by week. So the first week back, our daily attendance each day that we were in session then was in total about 7 members of our staff out. The week after that, it went up to 8. This is every day. This isn't 8 in a week. This is every day. And then it started to decline a bit the week before the December recess. So right now we have 2 substitutes available at the elementary school, and we have none at the high school. And so this week on Monday, we had 6 absences, and we weren't able to open school. And so knowing this, just if it was a regular flu season, this is kind of an attendance pattern that would be fairly typical. So then when you get back after December recess, again, you can see the first week back, we average about 8 absences, and that spikes up to 12, and it fluctuates between 8 and 12 absences a day until February recess as it declines a bit, so you can see a lot of activity right after a break, and then you can see it starts to decline a bit. Still high, but does decline a little bit after that. And then February recess happens, and then there's the spike again in the 2 weeks afterwards. So this is just a cold and flu season pattern of absences, and then the next layer. So we have a staffing issue. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question on that last chart? A couple of questions.
Sure.
Do we know causation? Do we know why folks were out? Were they out sick during those times? And how does that time period compare with the shoulders before and after it?
Before, and I didn't put this information in because I didn't want the chart to be unwieldy, but in November, you tend to have a couple more absences that are manageable.
Yep.
But it's not in the range that you see after Thanksgiving break, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and the other question was, are we assuming that the bulk of those absences on the chart are due to, cold or flu or,
Yep.
seasonal illness?
And of course, with the protocols now, remember last year, if you had the sniffles, you'd come in. And this year we're saying if you have any symptoms and you're not feeling well for any reason, don't push through it. Don't take a whole bunch of cold and flu, allergy type medications and then come to school. We're saying stay home. We're saying that to students and we're saying that to staff. And so this data that you're looking at here tonight doesn't reflect that hypervigilance piece on not coming in if you're not feeling well. So, and I don't know how you capture that, so that's another another part that's not going to be captured in data.
Susan, can I
Yeah.
ask a question? Isn't right now, the flu season kind of it's less at this point than it normally is? Because of, I read something somewhere, because of everyone wearing masks, the flu hasn't, been as high as it normally would be.
I tried to find some information because I think that was mentioned last week, but I wasn't able to find anything.
Yeah, I think I read something actually from the CDC's, website. Um, if you
Yeah.
came across anything.
I haven't come across anything, Amy. I did look, but I wasn't able to find anything. Doesn't mean there isn't somebody out there saying that, and certainly it would make some sense that if everybody's wearing masks, that you wouldn't be transmitting germs, but since we don't have any information that would validate that right now, we can only go by what we have for information and what we can validate. And there's so many things that can change any and all of this. But you know, there's certain patterns that we're accustomed to seeing, and we're in a circumstance where we don't have the level of resources available to us to address the needs, even if they were reduced.
Right.
Even if you cut those numbers in half, Amy,
Mm-hmm.
we still don't have enough staff to keep open. If it goes from 12 to 6 and it's every single day, it's just not, it's not feasible to cover that level of absence. So,
And Susan.
I do know the Southern Hemisphere, and Australia in particular, they found a drastic decrease in flu-related illnesses during their flu season. They believe because of COVID preventions and protocols. So maybe worth looking into.
Masks are here to stay.
yeah, I think that, I don't know to what degree it will prove it.
Susan, just on a point you made earlier too, I just wanted to make sure, because, you know, there's been some guesses that there are no subs at the junior, senior high school. Some of the ways we've been covering really from day one, you know, tried to hire, you know, monitors and additional staff to cover, and we tried to hire, you know, 3 full-time subs without any luck. We hire people now, and it's not surprising, right? Hire folks in, you know, to come to a school building in the middle of a pandemic. So that's not surprising, but it's our reality. But the way it's been is, you know, administrators and folks from the SAU office have been filling in all along. Is that correct, or?
It is. And this is just September and October level absence that we're covering with all hands on deck. And so more absences, there's no capacity left, you know, to be able to cover additional attendance issues.
Susan, this is Amy again. As far as the substitutes are concerned, have you given any thought to maybe just for the time period right now where we're having difficulty finding people, is to have non-certified subs, you know, on short term, not a long-term basis, just, you know, to fill in a day here, fill a day there. And maybe we could get some subs that way?
Well, you know, yes, we can certainly do that. That's what we do now. So what we do is we take paraprofessionals who are in the building and we reassign them. But we're about, I think Erica said 12 paraprofessionals short. And of course, we were never able to get the 10 monitors hired because there's no applicants. So even if we reduce it and say, hey, substitutes, that don't have the same level of credentials, there still aren't people out there applying for those jobs, because if they were, we would be fully staffed with paras. So it's the same pool that we're drawing from.
Okay.
A lot of times, even bus drivers, not always, but they oftentimes, and paras and subs, oftentimes are mothers who are able and fortunate to be able to stay home during the day and are looking for something to do while their kids are in school, and retirees. Sometimes you'll get subpools. There's a lot of teaching positions. With few vacancies in school districts, you'll get, an overflow of young teachers trying to get their feet in the door, but we're not seeing that either. Um, so kids that are graduating from school, they're getting jobs because there's more jobs now, because we have to keep our class sizes small. So everybody's gobbling up the any teacher resources that are out there. So it's just all of these compounding impacts of the virus and the circumstances we're in that just make this really challenging to, to be able to come up with solutions that will address the issues that we have. So there's, like I said, there's multiple layers to this. We haven't even talked about COVID yet. This is just regular, ins and outs of a school year cycle. Other than, the real shortage of staff in all areas. But then we get to the COVID trends, and we start to look and see what's going on here in our state. And if you guys can see this, I'll try to open it up a little bit bigger. So this is the dashboard, the state dashboard, and it's updated regularly. And you can see this trend here is from the beginning of the COVID.
Susan, we're not seeing the actual trends. We're just seeing the face sheet, which says New Hampshire COVID trends.
Can you see it now?
No.
Okay. Well, let me just, okay, well then I don't know how to fix that. So I'll go to the next slide. I have some information. Summary of at least new markets. So right now, in New Hampshire, and not just in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, all around us, everywhere, the numbers are skyrocketing. And of course, we were told by, those in the medical field and the experts and scientists that we would see this spike again in the fall. And as they predicted, we're seeing a spike in the fall, and the spike is more intense than the original outbreak, right? It's rapidly growing at a pace that's very different. And of course, some people say that's because we're testing, but the testing hasn't increased since, June, July, when testing, supplies and resources were deployed. So during the summer, there's not, significantly more testing available now than there was a month ago, right? So more people are being tested, certainly, because more people are having symptoms or are told they're being exposed, or are getting out. And so we've seen more and more. So in mid-September, right after we opened school, and when we opened school, we had 0 active cases and 13 cumulative since March here in Newmarket. So we were opening school saying, wow, we really, have gotten by, with not as significant impact as other communities. And so we were all feeling really good about that. Now we're 7 weeks into the school year, and we currently have 12 active cases, and we've had double-digit numbers here for over a week. And cumulatively, and this is since in 7 weeks, we've gone from 13 to 45. So this means the growth in 7 weeks is 37 positive cases, which then translates into, for us here in our school, student and staff being quarantined has been 60, more than 60. So it's not just how many COVID positives you have, it's the ripple effect of those COVID positives that impact families and students and our staffing.
Hey, Susan, Susan, just to
yeah.
be clear, the 12 active cases are in the Newmarket community at large, not the school, correct?
Right, data, not
Yep.
school data.
Yep.
And those
Yep.
are included within 45.
And so it's not, yeah, the cumulative effect, the 45, that's not in our schools. In fact, in our schools, we've had 2 Newmarket-based COVID positives, 1 staff member and 1 student, and the other staff member was not a Newmarket resident. So that person would not be showing up in our Newmarket numbers.
Can you dig down to the staff quarantine for me a little bit? So it's just 60 plus, which seems like a very high number. Are those a result of staff being within other staff in our school and having to quarantine, or is that a result of people in their households or other contact outside of the school?
The quarantine, so the quarantines that have been required, big staff COVID, were 5. So we only had 5 quarantines from the 2 staff members. The lion's share of the quarantines are coming from contact within families or outside of school. So for example, students are their parent who was tested positive in the work environment, let's say. And so that family goes into quarantine while that parent or family member goes into isolation. And then whoever that person comes in contact with, then, through contact tracing, other people are identified. So that's one category. Another one is the case of students participating in sports. So the majority of our quarantines are a result of non-school functions that students are participating in, where outbreaks occur and impact our kids, and then those kids have to be in quarantine. So the majority of our quarantines are students, not staff members, and no students have been quarantined because of a staff member.
And Susan, I would assume that that number would fluctuate as people move in and out of the quarantine process.
It does.
I think that's the total.
And it doesn't, and quarantines can, a student can be in quarantine for a couple of days, contact tracing, right? And then maybe eliminated. Most of them are 2 to 4 weeks.
Now, Susan, I think you said last week we were in the 40 range of quarantine. Is that where we still are this week?
No, we're lower.
Okay.
Many have come off of quarantine and more people have gone on quarantine. Students, not staff.
Can I just make a comment, Gary? I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, apparently.
I don't think your mic is working very good.
Apparently. It seems like it's not. Is this any better?
It's a little better, yep.
Let me switch.
Okay. So this is the COVID piece, and this is not even the numbers and the staffing issue that I was referring to early. This is another layer on top of that. The impacts COVID is going to have in addition to flu and cold season. So then we add this whole part of travel and quarantine, which has been really what everybody's been focusing on. There, perhaps, the order that I presented it the last time, people, focused on this as opposed to the challenges around staffing and the flu season. I'm not really sure, but for whatever reason, this is another layer, and that is the travel advisory and quarantine guidance from the state, which they are looking at and said that they would likely be modifying, though we haven't seen anything yet. I had my meeting with the commissioner on Wednesday, not personally with just me, all superintendents, and he said that they would be providing some additional travel guidance before the holiday season. I don't know when that will be, but right now, this is just a week or so ago from the department, New Hampshire Public Health and Services, so Health and Human Services, the HHS, and this is what they're saying. You know, we continue to discourage personal non-essential travel, especially on public transportation. We continue to discourage people gathering in groups where potential close contact might occur with or without travel. And our travel and quarantine guidance remains the same. People traveling to or from areas outside of New England states need to quarantine for 14 days from the last day of travel. So there's two parts to this. It's not just whether you travel out of New England, it's also traveling outside of your bubble. Because the more you travel outside of your bubble, the more susceptible you are to, the transmission of the virus, because there's more contacts you're having with people that you wouldn't normally have contact with. So we asked parents, we asked parents if they had any intentions of spending time with people outside of their bubble during the holiday breaks. And the responses are presented here. So the survey answers said very likely. So 120 of the 587 respondents said that they were very likely to engage in activities with people outside of their bubble. 103 or 17, almost 18% said they were somewhat likely to do so. And then 20% said somewhat unlikely, and others very unlikely, which represented about 40%. So this tells us that there are folks that will be out and about connecting with people that are outside of their normal group contacts. So again, this suggests that the risk of getting any germs or coughs or colds or anything that would present flu-like symptoms will increase, as it has in the past. So that's the result of that. And then we also asked parents, so therefore, knowing all of this, we're short-staffed, the cold and flu season's coming up. We knew it was going to. We anticipated this. We didn't anticipate we wouldn't be able to get subs and fully staff. We knew it would be tough to try to get everybody, but we didn't know that we would be completely subless, practically, and that we wouldn't really know the impacts of COVID and how that would impact our ability to provide quality learning experiences for kids. So with all of that in mind, do we think it's prudent to consider a planned shift to remote after these holiday recesses, when we see challenges with being able to staff properly, or do we wait and see, and then I make the call on an emergency basis like we have up until this point? And so at the town hall meeting, we only had 72 that responded to this question. 76% said they preferred planned, 24% said emergency, and parents on the call suggested that we send a survey out so that we could get a broader pool of respondents, and we did that. And so that data came back. We had 585 responses. Some of those from the same, you know, person, perhaps using a different device, or two members from the same household. But just looking at the raw responses, 57% said they preferred a planned transition to remote, and 44% said just do so in an emergency. When we took out and eliminated the multiple responses per household, the numbers were still about the same. I rounded these up, so that's why the first one doesn't add. It's because it was rounding. But roughly the same numbers is the point. So that's what the parents said. For the most part, for the majority, they would prefer planned. And some would prefer that we just, we just wait and see, and I make the call, the night before and let them know where we're at. So then I read, we had a section in there that asked parents also what holiday that they would be traveling, but unfortunately the way that question was set up, they couldn't pick multiple answers. So a lot of in the comments section, they would write, I could only select one, but I plan on traveling for most or all of those. So that really got us to the information that we were hoping for on that, because the question type was multiple choice as opposed to, pick all that apply.
Susan, I was
yes.
wondering if I could, now I can be heard too well. I was wondering if you could go back to the survey results. You said once you deduped it, you were down to 500 respondents, but in the original data about being very likely, somewhat likely, you had a total of 587. Did you get an opportunity to dedupe those to find out if it changed the percentages at all?
I didn't. I could, but I didn't have the time, Gary.
Okay.
I suspected that when I did take out the duplicates here, it really didn't have any impact on what the results were. So, and I just didn't have time to go through line by line for each and pull those out. Okay, so then the parent comments. So they could say anything that they wanted to, but I always like to do a theme analysis, what's coming up frequently. And so the comment that was made most frequently was around the idea of safety first, be cautious. We know people are going to travel, and so let's just be safe, So there was 26 of the comments were around that. 11 comments related to childcare issues. Parents saying, they have to go to work. They don't know how they will be able to support their kids at home while having to work themselves. Others, there were 9 comments that related to parents feeling that it was unfair, that others' choices would impact those who are following the safety recommendations. So there was some folks that were feeling frustrated because they want the kids to be able to, stay in school, but understand that, that there's challenges in doing that. So 9 were around frustration. There was 9 comments that related to, their child needing in-person social interaction to learn. In other words, remote learning did not, their kids disengaged and were not able to access their education because of their emotional and or physical situations at home. So then there was 8 comments that were made that related to shifting to remote for an extended period. And the range in that was, you should go out 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and stay out until, 2 weeks into January. Some of them said, let's just go to remote for the rest. Some of them said, let's go out after Thanksgiving and through the second week of January. So they were kind of all over the map, but the idea was to shift to remote for an extended period. So there was 8 comments made around that. And then there was, there's one-offs here and there. There was a bunch of comments, like I said, that were around, I couldn't check all of the holidays that our family plans to engage outside of the bubble. There were a number of those. I didn't think it was worth tallying those up. So that's what the results of the parent survey are. So we've, had our town hall meeting. This is the third board meeting that this has been a topic of conversation. We had an iteration that I shared, with parents and staff. We've had two sessions with staff, one town hall, and then I gave them an update on the parent town hall. So we've been talking about this for a while. And based on, the full range of comments, these are what I would say are probably the most reasonable changes to make to the calendar. That is really focused on teachers being able to plan properly for student learning, predictability, for families and for kids and for teachers. What we're trying to do here is the idea here isn't to have kids remote. The idea here is to maximize the amount of time that kids are in school this year by making, some strategic choices. If kids come back and the trends continue, I'll have to be closing school without any kind of advance notice. That will be very disruptive to kids and families and teachers. Having predictability of when kids are coming into school helps those kids that are at risk, so that we're not going for long periods of time while those disengaged students are disengaged. What we have found is that most of the kids that go off radar when we go remote show up to school when we're in session. So, those kids that are at risk, having time here together is really important, socially and emotionally and academically. With all of that in mind, the calendar suggestions are to eliminate all early release and late start days that are currently on the calendar, except for December the 23rd. That December the 23rd would remain an early release day, but it would be a remote learning day so that we could have the maximum amount of time with kids for teaching and learning. That we eliminate all 3 professional development days, January, March, and May. Now, those are the days that we spend doing curriculum work, but given that the circumstances are what they are, preserving teaching days, I think, in the calendar is probably what's best. Implement the learning for 2 weeks following Thanksgiving, the December holiday break, and February recess, and revisit having that remote learning after the April recess until March, and we see what's going on there. And then we would have all snow or emergency closure days would become remote learning days, so that way we can not lose a day midweek that we can kind of keep our momentum going. We have fewer disruptions of kids being in and out. It's more predictable for parents, and that we would have school end on June the 18th because we won't be having any remote learning days. With this plan here, we would meet the 180-day requirement for the state to be in session. I did speak with the commissioner this week and reviewed with him, you know, what we're doing here, and he had nothing but praise for us. He said that, you know, we are providing significantly more instruction for our students here in Newmarket than most school districts are in the state. And that they would work with us to, you know, closely to make sure that we're able to either totally meet the time and learning requirements in terms of hours. We will already meet the time and learning requirements for days if the board chooses to accept this recommendation. So I think all in all, this is not what anybody wants to do. I mean, but given what we know, it seems that this is probably going to be the best way forward to ensure that we maximize the number of on-campus day for our kids. So that's the administration's recommendation.
Thank you, Susan, for all that. It's very helpful, and know a lot more now than I did at the beginning. Had a couple observations. First of all, the question in the survey about going out of your bubble seems more germane to the issue of the risk of spread than simply asking folks if they're going to travel, right? I mean, you know, you can travel 1,000 miles and not see anyone and be at low risk, or you could go to a neighbor's, you know, without masks and 50 people, and that can be a higher risk situation. So there's no perfect way to gather that data and ask that question, because, you know, you don't know what groups of people are going to be associating with. But that relevant question, simply asking if people are going to travel out of state, and especially the you know, quarantining, you know, if you're traveling out of New England, again, that seems a little or somewhat irrelevant to me at this point, given the you know, the widespread comeback of COVID. And for instance, you know, you could travel to Massachusetts into a high-risk area, but according to that, you know, that directive that's still in New England, so you don't have to quarantine, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So there's that. That was more of a comment in just looking at that data in the qualitative part of it. The second observation I have is I guess a question, and maybe, I don't know if you have Joanne here weigh in on it. Since we have we're really thin in terms of our staffing given the current situation, and we really don't have there, is a you know, without expressing judgment, you know, is to understand from a staffing point of view, are people going to travel, and do they anticipate having our staff going to travel, having to quarantine after these, you know, vacation periods? Because, you know, if that's a pretty black and white answer, and they're responsibly quarantining, and we can't operate, well, then that makes the decision pretty easy. Have we looked at that angle? I'm sure it's been talked about, but has it gone to staff on that issue?
No, I didn't do that because to me it's not irrelevant, because we don't have enough substitutes, regardless of quarantine, to open our schools, just based on the typical flu season, and then overlay that with COVID impacts. So to me, it's less about having to quarantine or not quarantine. Really, the challenge, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, is one of not having adequate staff to be able to keep our schools open when folks call out sick.
So won't that situation exist after these 2-week periods that we would be out? I mean, and of course, these 2-week periods periods aren't a guarantee that we can come back and open school and have normal operations, but, I mean, do we think that we would be lessening the risk of staff absences if we do these 2 weeks, and if so, why?
Well, and who knows, Mike, right? The theory is that if people come back from their thing, parents will go back to work or families will stay within their bubble again, that the school and the transmission is then not being spread beyond the bubble. So, and this, you have kids in your own house, the flu will run through the household. If 3 people have the flu and they're going out, then the likelihood that they're going to spread it increases. And so by taking this measure, as you could see in the data, after the 2 weeks, right directly after we come back from a recess, although it's still not great for us because we still don't have enough substitutes, you can trend where it's to improve a little bit. So the thinking is, and only time will tell, that if people are in remote for 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, there's no sports will not start, like games will not start until January for sports here. So I think that it minimizes the transference by having 2 weeks where we're kind of in their own space. So I mean, either way, we're not, we don't have enough subs. The likelihood that we'll have to call on a day-by-day basis is pretty likely.
And that exists even if this proposal is adopted. And I think that's important to make clear, that it just isn't a guarantee that we come back and we don't have the same issues like we had on Monday, with staffing.
There's no guarantee. Don't do it, there's no chance.
I guess I have a couple thoughts. So if we're talking about students quarantining, hopefully they do. If they don't, fortunately the protocols we have within the school system should mitigate most spread. Now, obviously there's no guarantee, so we want to ask people that if they quarantine. But then we also have the separate issue of teachers being out and quarantining. And I know there was an article, I believe I sent you last week, that talked about teachers being essential workers, and talk to the DHHS or Department of Education about that.
That was part of, we can't get any concrete answers. What they said is that they were revising their guidance around travel and that we should have it at some point in the next week or so. So, I don't have, sometimes their guidance doesn't translate into answers.
Sure.
For us in practice. And so one of the benefits of having time with the commissioner on Wednesdays is that we as superintendents have the opportunity to explain to him, where there is tension points between the guidance or some of these ideas that are put forward, and how that might translate or not translate into what we're doing here, boots on the ground. So he didn't have any answers for us. They didn't have any real explanations. So we're waiting at this point to hear more.
And I guess one of the other thoughts I had was, I understand if the board was going to adopt this, I understand the benefit of talking about the November break at this point. But I'm less sure we need to make a decision on December, and certainly even less on February. Wouldn't it make more sense to see how November break goes and then decide perhaps on December, and as you pointed out, even later on March? or February rather, and then April?
I think that the predict is important, and it helps us enormously in how we plan for things. So the more predictable that we can be, better it is for everyone.
And then I guess my
Not knowing is really hard on families, it's really hard on teachers, and it's super hard on kids.
no, and I can empathize. Personally, I'm not one who's going to travel, and I have an 85-year-old mother who lives 2 towns over, and I'm not even going to have her in our house for Thanksgiving. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's concessions that we all have to make, unfortunately, and I can certainly empathize. The other kind of more broad question, if we're having so much staff, should we maybe consider shifting sections of the school, for instance, maybe the 11th to remote, given that they're more likely to be able to handle kind of that they would be getting in a college environment, and would that free up some resources for the other grade, more of the school open?
We've talked about that a bit. And there's of course challenges with all of it, right? I mean, we know that we can shift out one school or the other based on need, but it's not ideal for the kids. It just isn't. I mean, if we can keep, you know, certainly if we have to start to siphon off, we'll make, but, you know, I think the message from our community and, you know, from your educators is on-campus learning that we can provide this year, the better. And if it comes down to having to make those kinds of choices, then we will do so. But at this point, you know, we're not. That's not where we're going right now.
Just to follow up on that, if that, we're just, look, there's no one right answer to all this stuff. We're all trying to, the ultimate goal here is to keep kids in school as much as we can. So, and there's no one right answers, and we're operating with a situation that changes every day. So this is in the nature of sort of spitballing to talk us through this and think about it. But if we do that, Susan, that doesn't alleviate your staff problem, because you still have to teach those kids with the same staff. You might free up some space. Is that the right analysis?
Well, it's tricky. When we go remote, it frees up some staff. It frees up some staff because we have some teachers that are teaching remotely to students on campus. And in we have to provide a staff member in that classroom while the teacher's not present. So when we go remote, it does free up those regular ed paraprofessionals to be able to help us with substitute. It's one of the things that we've done. Like we patched, when we've gone remote at the junior senior high school, we send the staff down to the elementary so that they're better staff down there. But it's, you know, it's not ideal, certainly. But there is some of that we can do and will continue to, you know, to do to keep our kids on campus. But I mean, we did actually have this conversation about, well, you know, is it time to consider some other options? I mean, my heart goes out to all of our students. I mean, I think of those juniors and seniors and anyone in our high school right now, they have not had the best experience, you know, in high school. And the more we can keep them together at this time, I think, you know, it has even though they're high school kids and they're bigger and they can work more independently, they still have social emotional needs. And I would argue that my son was in many ways more needy in his junior and senior years than he was in middle school. Different kinds of needs, of course. But I think it's important, if we can keep kids coming in, that we do.
Susan, just one more thought from me is does it, and I'm sure you've considered all these angles, does it make any sense to see how this how Thanksgiving break, or the Thanksgiving might go, come back normally, if there is a normal nowadays, but come back without, having the 2 weeks, see how it goes, and from there, what poke holes in that one, what is,
Well, I mean, I'm going to tell you the truth. I think there's a 95% to 100% chance that Sunday night after Thanksgiving, I'm going to be calling families and telling them that I can't open schools. If I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't have brought this forward. I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when. And it's a how, what is best? I mean, we can roll the dice, but based on the data I've shown you here tonight, I don't,
it sounds like we'd have to roll a double. Yeah, so, that's good information too for folks, that, this isn't, rolling the dice here, that, there's not a heck of a chance that if we were to do that, from what I gather, Susan, that we'd be lucky and come back in, and you have to weigh that against the benefit of planning and doing it in a structured way, so you get the most out of that remote learning experience.
and I think another thing that are struggling, I did have a conversation with Erica today and asked her if she could have our social worker look for options for families who are in that situation where they absolutely were, to see if she can find any resources available through her networks, families, to help them out in some way. I don't know what that would be, but we do have a social worker on staff, and she lives in our community, and she certainly is familiar with, in the community, and maybe she can come up with some ways to help support them. I don't. None of the.
Yeah, I wonder, it probably doesn't make, go ahead, Amy, I've been talking.
No, go ahead.
Just, you raised a thought with me, I just, in this, again, spitballing's dangerous here, but I'll accept that risk. Has any thought been given along the lines of what you just said? We wouldn't be in our buildings during these times about, perhaps offering a linked together type, those families who are working and don't have any other options, and I know we're not in that business, but I know linked together sort of on their own. Is that even considerable, or?
I guess the only issue is they would need to team while they did it, right?
Right.
So it's not insurmountable, it'd just be a limited number.
Important, Susan, that you looked at that piece, because I think, when we think about these things, there is an impact on families to consider as a part of the process. So I appreciate that you reached out to Erica for the social worker aspect, because I think that's a great resource for people at this time.
I mean, there's no good answer, and there's no answer that's going to, where everybody's going to jump up and say, that's awesome. What a win-win for everybody. I don't think anything that we're doing here is a win-win for any. I think we're doing the best we can under some really challenging circumstances. And, that's all we can do is to solve as many of these problems as they can, and that's really all we can really hope for, right? Is people doing the best they can to get everybody the support that they need, which is a daunting task.
Susan, I wanted to ask you a question. On one of your suggestions, you stated this is a remote learning day. Why would that be remote?
Great question. When we were at the staff meeting, we had half days, of course, before we had staggered starts and arrivals and dismissals and all of that. And we know that it's between, I think, a half an hour and 45 minutes or so it takes to get everybody transitioned in. And so if we do that at the beginning and at the end, and you're only in here for 3 hours, then the amount of instructional time is so much, is reduced so much that the suggestion from one of our teachers was, well, if we went remote, then you could actually get a block of instruction that's meaningful, as opposed to just getting kids in, getting them here, having to feed them lunch, trying to teach them a little something, and then transitioning them out again. So that was the thinking, Amy. I thought it was really a really great idea.
Okay.
Made a lot of sense.
All right. Also, back to the sub piece. So when my kids were younger, I did sub at the elementary school, and I'm going back, 10 to 12 years. And I think the pay is the same as was then as it is now. Is there any chance that we could look at the pay rate of the subs? So I know that it's not going to have a impact right away, but it could help for the near future.
I'm happy to look. I don't know what we pay and how that relates to what other schools are paying, but I'm happy to do a little investigating.
Okay. And as Mike suggested a few minutes ago about maybe if we approach each like for example Thanksgiving, and see how it goes. I mean, I would feel more comfortable planning for remote for November and possibly December, but I don't know if I feel comfortable for the the following two vacations. So I think it's a great plan. I mean, I'd rather my children have more instructional time, but at the same time, I think we can't just assume that it's going to happen. And I just feel comfortable doing maybe the first two vacations. So that's it.
I guess, Susan, I just have one last request. Can the board get a copy of the
copy of the
calendar that you're proposing?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, and could we get a copy of the survey as well?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan, I don't remember if it was in our meeting last week or in the town hall meeting, but you talked about the specific need for the 2 weeks after February, pertaining to the flu uptick. Was that the rationale there? I don't remember what you said, but I remember that being a focus thing.
Yeah, the flu season's at its worst then. And so, having a break during the February break and not canceling February vacation, again, the idea here is to try to maximize the number of days that we're actually able to stay on campus, and with a healthier staff, with some predictability, trying to reduce, anxiety and stress from parents and staff and students is all important. And sick people don't learn well, and sick teachers can't come in. Sick students, even if it's a sniffle, can't come into school. And we already know that when you look at attendance, even with kids, I would say at the elementary school, we probably have, I don't know, Sean, what, a dozen, maybe more a day for students that are out?
Yes, I would say, yeah.
Even more
We're around a dozen at least.
now.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and how does that compare to prior years? Is that typical for this time of year? Or are parents keeping their kids home out of an abundance of caution?
I would say that is probably a little higher than usual, but I can't completely recall that off the top of my head. But it does seem a little higher. We do have parents who are being very proactive when a child's not feeling well in keeping them home.
And also when the kids come in, if they have sniffles, when we screen them, we put them into quarantine and we have the parents come pick them up. So.
Correct. Yeah, they're displaying anything that we feel the nurse feels is symptoms of COVID. They get screened and then their parents are called to pick them up. Correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
And I think for Amy's point, again, this recommendation is not, includes not making the decision about April vacation. Because if you look at the flu activity chart from CDC that I showed, it doesn't show a huge impact of the flu after April vacation. So that's the reason why, at this point, totally agree to look that far ahead when we don't have any data that would suggest that attendance after April vacation would automatically be problematic for us. But we have lots of data that shows after February vacation, that the numbers climb.
Okay, Susan, thank you again for, starting the conversation on this early. It's helpful that we've had time to think about it, ask further questions, and come back. If it's the board's pleasure, I'd like to put this issue on for a vote at our next meeting on November 12th, a week from today.
Sure.
And so we'll do that. And of course, if there are any further comments or thoughts from members of the public, we'd love to hear from you folks so far. Either by email or through the town hall. And the information is because we don't have a monopoly on any thoughts or ideas. So thanks. So we've the principals, Principal Dalton and Principal Pine, patiently waiting. Should we move on to the budget?
I would think so.
Susan, I don't know if you have any prefatory comments. Have the principals present on the budget aspects for the two schools.
Yes, so Sean and Dave are here. They're going to give you a little overview so you understand the needs and how this budget proposal supports addressing those needs. And then we're happy to answer any questions that we can. So I don't know, Sean or Dave, whoever would like to start us off. And the mic over to you.
I'll jump in. Good evening, everyone. How are we?
Good, Sean, how
Hi,
are you?
Sean.
Hello,
Good,
Principal Pine.
good. Thanks for everything you're doing here. It's not an easy position, and we appreciate your thoughts and your support of what we're doing here at the district. We're striving to do our best for the kids in Newmarket. So, and we will continue to do so. So I thought what I'd do is I'd kind of give you a very kind of brief, high level overview of the budget. If you have particular questions, I know that you have materials that I believe you into the meeting. Feel free to ask any questions and I will do the best to answer those for you. So let me just start right now. So basically the idea is that when I went in to develop this budget for the Newmarket Elementary School, we went in with the idea that we are going to be back to school in more of a traditional fashion than we currently are. It's been some challenging times this year for us, that's for sure. The kids are doing a great job. The staff is doing an outstanding job. But, it's not a truly traditional setting that we are currently working with the kids. One of the things that we know from the kids being out in the spring and even in a remote setting, even kids in the classroom right now, is that, we're pressed for some time for instruction. Teachers are doing a great job with it, but we also know that, and it's been kind of, you can read various articles, that there has been kind of a slide for kids. And that was also something that I took in consideration in developing this year's budget is that, how are we going to make up for some of the, lack of a better word, the progression of kids at a quote, quote, normal pace. So when taking kind of a look at that, one of the first things that we were fortunate to do is have this year smaller class sizes. And the district typically, even in a normal year, has guidelines to try to keep the class sizes to a minimum of no more than 22 and no more than 18, I believe, in the K to 2 and 22, 3 to 5. So one of the things that we're taking a look at is that we do have a 4th grade class for next year that we're looking at 88 kids in that class. One of my requests is that we take a look at bringing in an additional 4th grade teacher for next year to work with that bubble class. That would give us 5 at the 4th grade, reducing a potential of 22. We kept the traditional 4th grade team, bringing that down to about 17 to 18 kids in the class when we hire a 5th grade teacher. Also, kind of looking at the class sizes as well, we do have a smaller number at the 1st grade we're projecting for next year. That's based on our current kindergarten enrollment. It's kind of a little bit of I know, Mike, you sent along a question about that. That number for next year is based on what we know of kids being either in the remote or homeschooled or currently with us. One of the interesting things about the state of New Hampshire is they still don't mandate children go to kindergarten. You don't have to be in school until 6 years of age. And I'm suspecting that we may have some more out there, but I know that Dr. Givens and myself, we've kind of really crunched the numbers, and those are the numbers we're looking at there for that 63. Currently, we have at our 1st grade, we have a larger number, around 75, I believe. And we have an additional teacher who is traditionally a kindergarten teacher who is covering for our remote 1st grade this year. Mr. Hollick would go back down next year for kindergarten. So we'd move him from 1st grade this year back down into kindergarten. Kindergarten numbers we're predicting are going to be in the range of 75 to 80, mid 80s or so. So that's kind of the movement of staff so far for that we're looking at for next year. A couple of things that you would notice if you look at the budget in general, you'll see that we're up in a few areas. Again, those numbers are to obviously fund what we believe that our children and our staff need to effectively deliver outstanding education to our kids. Right now, we are looking at our scholar supply line. You will note that that supply line is up around $9,800, $10,000 or so. That is up a little bit because in the past, photocopying, the cost for teachers that use the photocopiers have been pulled out of my supply line. And I've never really put in that number until this year. And in looking at that and working with Ms. Bergeron, we came up in the neighborhood of around $10,000 for that additional funding for photocopying. It seems like a lot. We do use a fair amount of paper, but remember we're at elementary school. A lot of cut out, sheets to write on, that sort of thing. So it's more traditional type thing. We're also looking at a increase in our textbook line. That increase, again, we are currently piloting English language arts program with some of the 3rd grade teachers and also a couple of 4th and 5th grade teachers. The program is called Jump Into Writing. It's a writing program, and it's also a grammar and reading program. And we're piloting it this year. We're looking to make some sort of purchase if we feel comfortable that we feel it's effective making a purchase to getting that program down at the 3rd grade level to start. You know, we want to make sure that our kids are solid readers and writers as they leave the 3rd grade. It's a great program that it's kind of like a transition to the Super Kids program that we used in grades K through 2 right now. So it seems to be, we're just starting implementation with that pilot this year. The teachers are actually going to be attending a workshop this Friday or tomorrow on that program, Jump Into Writing. It's also, the textbook line you'll see is up because of the books for our media center are in there. Unfortunately, that was underfunded last year, and we are reinstating the traditional number that we've used in the past for the purchase of periodicals and books, particularly in the nonfiction genre for our kids. A couple other things that you're taking a look at, our software line is up a little bit. Software programs such as BrainPop and sorry, I'm drawing a blank on BrainPop. BrainPop, we're looking at IXL as well. Freckle, those are some of the software programs we're looking at. We're using some of them currently. One of the, I guess, sort of a silver lining is that we're seeing what programs are effective given our current circumstances and are looking to incorporate that into part of our instructional practice here in the school. I don't want to say we're going to have kids on computers when we're back in the building, but those programs often support the teachers additional drill, additional reading material, additional material that can challenge kids at an individual level, and they have that flexibility. So our software line is up, but that is to continue to incorporate some of this new software programs into the school in general. One of the bigger costs that you'll see in the budget is that we are looking to replace carpet. We currently have 12 classrooms that are carpeted. Those 12 classrooms, the carpet wasn't replaced as part of the construction project. It was taken out before the project started. But the carpets are really old. They're worn. They're tearing. They're buckling. That sort of thing. So we'd like to replace those carpets in 6 of those 12 rooms this year, and then do the next 6 rooms in the physical year 22.
Sean,
So yep.
excuse me for 1 second.
Yeah.
Where's the carpet? Is that repair and maintenance?
Yeah, that would be in the maintenance line. I did mention it in kind of a budget summary that I put there, Gary. So I want to make sure that we pointed it.
Great, thank you.
You know, one of the big thing about carpets, it was a big movement when the school was probably built in mid to late 80s. The carpet, like I said, is very old. It's hard to keep clean. Removing it would put in tile. So it would be something that it also would improve the air quality of those classrooms as well.
Do you have an estimate of what 6 rooms would be, a ballpark-ish?
Yeah, the cost I believe is about $6,000 per room, Gary.
Thank you.
So those are kind of the biggest things that we're doing this year. The rest of it I try to keep as level funded as possible. There are some slight increases that you'll see. You know, materials for teachers in terms of building their own library, classroom library, some text resources that teachers want to use for their own instruction and not or grade level instruction, not necessarily a program like Super Kids or Jump Into Writing. So that's kind of a big, quick overview of what we're looking at the elementary school for our budget proposed for next year.
Sean, I had one question about the 6 rooms and the carpet, just from sort of a COVID perspective.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about air quality, and, you know, I was wondering, and you answered it about whether we were assuming that people were gonna be back in school or not, and assuming that's what's gonna be, I don't, I know it would be, $36,000 more to achieve this, but I wonder if it makes sense to look at all the 12 of those rooms at this point. Just from an air quality standpoint and a tile being easier to clean and sanitize than carpet at this point, just my
Problem
thoughts.
is 2021, 2022, but yeah, I agree. It is
Yeah.
a,
Yeah, like I said, it's really old. It's hard to keep clean. So many more. Maybe I'm just talking like the old man I am, I guess. It seems like kids will have a lot more allergies,
Yep.
airborne allergies. That carpet, it gets damp during the summer just because of the amount of humidity. Who knows? You're talking 30 years of milk and cookies and that sort of thing being ground into it.
I think you sold us on that one.
It's the original carpet?
So, not to color code it, but think of it, if you had wall-to-wall carpeting in your house that was 30 years old, it'd be pretty worn and you'd be looking to get rid of it. I mean, if we could do it all in one setting, that'd be great, but I think it's a reasonable approach to do 6 this year. The other 6 classrooms, the carpet isn't as in bad shape. It was probably replaced sometime or another many years before my arrival to the school, so.
And Sean, I would say that I would not definitely want to detract at all from any sort of student-specific student learning piece to
Right.
accomplish that goal, so just to clarify
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sean, could you just dig a little bit into the increase in professional services, and then furniture is decreasing, but given the new facility, I'm just wondering what specific kind of furniture we're talking about.
Unfortunately, I can't talk about the professional line, Gary.
Okay.
I didn't budget that line in particular.
Oh,
That was
gotcha.
set up by Jenna in the business office. Furniture, you're gonna see a decrease in that. We're looking to still replace chairs and that sort of thing. But the elementary school, we're pretty good on furniture now. Besides, we're trying to get into a kind of replacement cycle for classroom chairs. We have some desks that are very old that we're looking to replace as well. And that's why the line's lower, but we still have a fair amount of money in there to do that sort of thing.
So a lot of the furniture, or a fair amount of furniture, didn't get replaced as part of the
Yeah,
renovation?
yeah.
Okay,
Last year,
thank
like
you.
for instance, last year, I know that we replaced all the furniture in the media center.
I see.
When we did, we got desks and chairs for various rooms throughout the building. So, there's bits and pieces we still need to pick up, but I would say that we're pretty well furnished at this time. And again, just looking at doing some sort of replacement cycle for furniture that has been there for many years. That it's showing its wear.
Sure, that
And,
makes sense.
we want to make sure we take care of that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sean, where did
Yeah.
you put the books for the media center? What line?
Yeah, that goes into the textbook line, actually, Amy.
It does, okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you're saying the textbooks for the media center and the cost of that program, jumping to writing is 41,000, the total?
Amy, that also takes into account other books that teachers have requested to have in their
Oh.
library as well. So I'm
Okay.
sorry for not clarifying that. That is to cover all our text costs here. That also
Okay.
includes the covering of our Super Kid program, which we have things that we order each year that come out of our textbook line as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
More of a comment than anything. Thanks for being with us tonight and presenting this.
Sure.
When I was initially looking at the demographics, or the enrollment, I should say, projections on page 2, I was looking at it, at the elementary school projected to be, down 2 students next year, and then seeing the request for the, for the 4th grade teacher, and wondering just initially until I got later on in the budget document, it really seems to make a lot of sense to me. I think, I'm glad you guys gave it thought that next year that is not a year, and hopefully we're back somewhat to normal, that we'd really want to be pushing class sizes up. it's critical. Any gaps, if we can, and I really appreciate the thought that went into that. But I also, think that you're gonna seems if you look at the numbers for the grades coming after it, because they're pretty much in the same size.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, Mike. I think that particularly that fourth grade class, it's a bubble class. The third grade class right behind there, you're looking at 85. We may need to move some people around to cover to make a fifth as well,
Yeah.
but do that internally. But yeah, I think that is something that position, not necessarily that person, may have to transition up to the fifth grade with that fourth grade class, or the 24 budget. Ooh, that 23 budget.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean,
Sure.
I'm pretty curious about the Title I, and how the federal youth program revenues are gonna be decreasing by $160,000. Why is,
Part of it is well, it's a federal program, and they're just learning some cost over there. Dr. Gibbons may have a better explanation for why. Also, it's based on our demographics of those kids who qualify for the program. We take a look at kind of like levels. So those, that's part of it. But are in new markets, so we have less kids that are probably qualifying for Title I, so that would result in less funding.
so you're saying that Title I is given to, children who say,
No, not necessarily. That's one of the measures that the federal government uses for when they help fund a school. But Title I is open to children that need the services and they qualify under those federal guidelines. So all kids.
oh, okay, yeah, I thought
they-
that, I was.
Yeah, they just use one of the measures that they use. Children do we have in our free and reduced lunch population? That's
Oh,
that's
okay,
one measure that
gotcha.
they use. Really. Yeah.
You would think that thing with all the COVID effects, that are going to affect us for years, so it's just decreasing by that much.
Yeah, it is interesting, and as you said, the COVID effect that it's going to have an impact on our population of students, not only next year but years down the road, and we all know that, and
Right.
kind of need to really step up our game and make sure that we're getting those, not only class, getting those services that all the kids need to. Let's get them caught up as quick as we can, and
Right.
stressing them out either. So it's a challenge, but we can do it.
Yep, can.
The other thing I failed to mention in there too, I did ask for an increase in our summer school, and that is up a bit. Last year we had a fair amount of summer school. I think we're going to need it again, given what we're dealing with, and give kids those that we identify who would benefit from attending summer school. So I believe that it probably is like $1,000 increase. It isn't too substantial, but I think I asked for $1,500 last year because we summer school limited basis, and also used some Title I money for it too. But I could foresee a greater need for kids in attending summer school, and we'd like to be able to offer it.
I just had one more question, Sean. So you're asking for an teacher.
Yep.
What will happen in 2 years when the numbers are down? Is it like that person again, or
Yeah,
what do you project?
Yeah, it really depends on how our school level population goes up or down. We at a lower level, and we use that position at a lower level. I would hate to say that we would have to let someone go, but that's in the playbook as well.
Right. Okay.
I won't deny that, but ideally, when we hire people, we want to keep them on and make them part of our community. And if we feel they are talented and so far the hires that we've had this year, we've been thoroughly impressed with the caliber teachers that we brought in this year at the elementary school.
I think another thing that plays into it, Amy, is that people will retire. We have, a couple
That's
that
true,
are
yep.
really close, and so as those retire, if our student population overall goes down, usually have a retirement or two every year. So you can absorb that. If the need isn't there, we can likely make the adjustment. So.
I forgot about that, Susan. Yes, that's true. We do. I know we have some teachers that will be retiring in the next few years as well.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Great seeing you all. I will be in the background here.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything, Sean.
Thank you, Kim.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Sean, I appreciate you being in the background. I may need to lean on you for a couple of things from your historical perspective and knowledge of our budget here. It's good to be here. I feel like I've been here a long time, but it feels like a long time
It
sometimes.
does, doesn't it?
But I just point out that, it's really been September and October for me seeing the school function. And I've learned an incredible amount about the school, about our staff, about our kids in that short time, but also realize that there's an incredible amount of information left for me to sort of digest, process, analyze as we think about, the long-term plans for any educational changes for, either the junior high or the high school. And it goes without saying that in this environment, we're thinking about, one day at a time at times, and that sort of view has been challenging. But with all of that said, there is a lot of wisdom in the building. Dr. Givens has been really helpful. Sean's been helpful that have been here in terms of, identifying needs and challenges, has been really helpful to sort of formulate some ideas about what needs to be done and what needs to be worked on. All that is said, I say to tell you that the junior high school budget, where we'll start, if that's okay with you, is relatively, it's relatively stable. It's relatively unchanged, and that would make sense given where we are in terms of this year and at least my ability to impact any significant changes. That said, I will share with you, we had the junior senior high school had a PD day on election day, and we had a very, I think, engaging, sort of thought-provoking, open discussion about, how we serve our kids. And we used the standards from NEASC as sort of a grounding tool for examining and thinking about our practices as a junior senior high school. And lots of good ideas were shared. Asking teachers to think about their programs with a student lens in mind, with thinking about it from the student's point of view and the experience that they're having along the way, and what sort of works well with along that voyage currently, and what are some areas of challenge for us. And we had a really great day, and I was really impressed by teachers' willingness to sort of, in a new environment with a new principal sort of leading the day, to be honest about what they see working well in those areas of challenge. And so it was a really good day, and it's going to give us a groundwork from which to really dig deeper into those ideas, those thoughts, some of those challenges that were raised. And I believe that this budget, although it certainly doesn't address everything yet, will give us a good start toward that work. So all that's to say, our junior senior high school our junior high school rather, grades 6 to 8 is it's really, it's funny we use a junior high school name in the name, but it really functions as a middle school and a middle school model, as you know. We continue to have 4 content areas at each level in the core areas. That continues to be a really efficient model. It was one of the things that we noted as a strength on our PD day. The middle school model is a good model. Teaming is really good for horizontal sort of efforts at a grade level. And with our enrollment remaining fairly stable, we have an increase of 2 students. You know, class sizes are not going to be a challenge. We'll still be in that 20 to 22 range for each grade, which works well. And we don't see any real challenges with that. There are, our staffing is level at the junior high. We have no net change in FTE. You may notice on the chart that we're moving a half-time FTE from special ed to guidance. And I know, and that shows up in both budgets. When you look at the high school budget, you see the corresponding move as well. And basically, what that is just recognizing that the special ed counseling aspect that person has been serving, that's not a special ed cert. There's no special ed expertise. It was just a role that our counseling department was playing in special education. So there's no loss in service there. It's just putting that person into the department that is actually in line with their certification. I will also say that sort of changes a mindset, and we'll talk about that when we get to the high school budget. We'll talk a little bit about sort of that restructuring and guidance and what we're working toward there. So salaries are level, FTEs are level. We get into operating costs, which includes all of our stuff, and you'll note some changes similar to Sean. There's the piece with the copier costs being included in the supplies lines that bumps that up a little bit. I highlighted the fact that we have some increases in software, and I'd speak to that a little bit. Sean touched on it with his budget, but one of the silver linings, if there is one, in all of this sort of remote teaching that's been happening, is that it's really raised the bar in terms of technology professional development for our staff. And I think, while there have always been, a few people who tend to like technology who are sort of out front in that area, this really thrusted a place where they had to become proficient very quickly. So a lot of exposure to new tools, lots of apps, lots of new uses and ways to design classroom activities or add on to existing units and make them a little bit more interactive. While you can talk about face-to-face learning and you can talk about remote learning, a truly personalized classroom that is differentiated to reach all of the kids in the room, if it's set up correctly, it's probably going to be a blended model of instruction, right? We're going to see in rooms where technology is integrated, you're going to see station work. You're going to see kids in different places, giving kids an opportunity to sort of move faster, those kids who are ready. And you're going to see other places where kids are going to need a little bit more time to hit that standard that they're working on. Maybe needs a little bit more support. So blended learning in the post-COVID world, I'm hopeful, will look like stations. We'll see pods of kids working together in one area or with another group of people in another area, and they'll be using this technology that they've learned and using some of these new apps and software and things. So I was pleased that people have started asking for this going forward, because it means it just wasn't a Band-Aid to get us through remote learning, but people are actually adapting and adopting these tools as part of their repertoire for instruction. So you'll see increases there. So some of those software things that we talked about were, some that Sean had mentioned, that they're using tools like BrainPop and Edpuzzle and KidBlog and MathMates, Squizia, and it's really, some of these tools are not new. I've seen these before, but it's sort of the way people are using them now, and being able to use them to, as Sean said, personalizing it for kids and creating opportunities to have kids advance their thinking in one group, and then yet be able to be supporting those kids who need a little additional instruction, maybe from a remedial perspective. You will see that this budget has a little bit higher request for supplies. We're adding art between the junior senior high school. We're increasing the amount of art that our kids have access to. And with art is one of those places where you're going to use up more supplies during the year. So you see a bump there that's commensurate with an art program. We are looking at expanding our ebook resources in the media center. So you see some additional costs there with text. But again, none of these requests, I don't think, in my opinion, are really, exorbitant in any way. They're really just supporting what's been going on in the classrooms and supporting, providing supportive materials needs for our kids. There is a 50%, I get the two schools, so we get to split the cost. So we get to see 50% of a request for a presentation station in the cafeteria auditorium area. One of the things I noticed when I came into the school, and we've got this beautiful building now and this beautiful renovation, and everybody, by the way, teachers, students, everybody loves it. It's just so warm and welcoming, and feels. But one of the interesting things was I asked about where we get together for student assemblies, and the answer was the gym, and I was really disappointed. That was just me. I was really disappointed because I was like, oh, the gym, that works, but it's not as sort of personal and up close with kids, which is something that
used to be the
I've been
nicest room in
accustomed
the
to.
school.
Yeah. So I really liked the thought of having this cafeteria area, and then I found out that that there may have been some talk about having this done, I think during the building phase or during the building project, and I think it got removed for whatever reason. I may not have that correct. But anyways, Jason Carey and I sort of came together on that, and so we've put a request in here for a presentation station in the cafeteria, which would give us the opportunity for, I think, a good meeting place that's not like cavernous. It's a good size location. You can get a whole grade or maybe even 2 grades could fit in that area at a time, and certainly it would be available for other uses as well. But I think it would be a nice addition and a continued improvement to spaces that are already very beautiful and educationally sound. But I think this is one piece that I would say would just get that much better. So I think from the junior high perspective, that's probably my highlights for you. If you want to do questions maybe by school, that would be helpful for me, because I just have to switch back and forth in my notes.
I just have one question, Dave. As far as the facilities salary, looks like there's a $50,000, approximately $50,000 increase in facilities. Do you know what that's for?
So I can tell you the general idea. I think that's a great question for Jana Mellon, our business person, who's been working with Dave Cressy for operations budgeting. But let's see, that is operations.
Well, Jana's here if you want to punt.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Jan.
Sure, yeah.
Did she want to join us?
Yeah.
So she can. come right up to the
Yeah.
dais. Jenna, just come right up to the front seat. No? All right.
And I think you were talking about the shift. You see there was a decrease in repairs and maintenance, but an increase in professional services, correct?
Actually, I first wanted to address Amy's question of Sean, and Sean rightly so said, I into my professional services. That was, that stems from an accounting change that we made at the business office level. In the past, repairs and maintenance covered everything, which included, annual inspections, upkeep of grounds, all that stuff, and it really didn't belong that way, so we stayed in New Hampshire accounting codes. So in most of these situations, you're going to see an increase in services, but you're also going to see a corresponding decrease in repairs and maintenance. The net difference across the district is very small. I believe it was like $3,200 total. Broken out that way, it looks like a jump in one area and a decrease in the other. So you're going to see that in junior high, middle. Hopefully that answers your question, Amy. And then as to the salaries, those salaries stem from two new positions that kind of reallocated our facilities staff to where they are actually kind of working. Two new positions that we have not yet been able to fill, those maintenance positions last year as part of the budgeting process. And they are going to be at a sort of a different tier. We're hoping to actually get some maintenance experience that might help us reduce our outsourcing needs for various things. So I think that is what you're seeing in that facilities line. Anything else?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Amy, can I ask you on that facilities line? So it's 132,000?
Let me pull, I don't have it in
That's
front of
the
me. I'm at the
proposed amount.
microphone.
Go ahead and ask your question, Amy. I think I can probably answer it.
Okay, so the 132 this is for how many positions? Is it for custodial positions or what kind? I'm confused on that.
So at the secondary level, we have, and some of this is just how we have to record things. And so there's been this arbitrary allocation from year to year that has shifted a little bit between what gets charged to the middle school versus what gets charged to the high school. And so as Janet said, there's no new positions here. There's nothing new here. It's just trying to clean up allocations to represent more clearly assigned, if you want to say that, to one cost center versus another. So we have, right now the model is to have a head custodian, and I think 4 people at the junior, senior high school. So
Okay.
it's the same. You can see if you look at the high school, it's a little less. It's down there and it's up here. And I think we're just trying to get some kind of a consistent way to allocate costs so you can make sense of what the changes are moving forward. So that's really what it is. And same thing with the professional services. As you go through and when you're new and you come in and you start look at things, you try to make sense of them. And sometimes after you've had lots of turnover, it's tough to make sense of why things are in a certain way. And so Jana being new, me new last year, we started, trying to put our costs in line with 2 things. 1, programmatically, how the resources are used, and 2, to align with the state's accounting code system that Jana has to do reports on at the end of the year. Now, my experience is that, and whether it's New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or any other financial reports I've seen throughout the country, that the accounting code structure doesn't really have a whole heck of a lot to do with what we're doing programmatically in schools. So what we tried to do here this year is start to make this transition to a budget presentation that would make sense programmatically and also allows Jana to be able to do her accounting reports according to what the standards are. So we're kind of in a little bit of transition, and Jana said this really well. She said, you know, I don't want to change accounting systems until I clean up the data in our current one. Because if you don't clean up the data in your current one and get that right, when you create the structure in a new system, then it makes a big fat mess. So right now it's a matter of untangling things and trying to get things categorized properly. And then once we get that phase done, then I think Nan is probably going to be asking for an appropriate accounting software system that will allow us to be able to do what she needs to do for reporting and allow us to have data to help inform our decision making. So that's a long answer, but that's, you see some of these changes. You'll see up on the salary line, it shows up on the staffing plan. When we look and we see Jamie, who's our athletic director, being recorded fully as a PE teacher when he should be recorded as an athletic person, and that we're just trying to clean that type of thing up. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And I also had a couple questions for Dave.
I'm here.
So, in reading under operating goods and services, it states that the supply line is now going to carry this copier-related expenses, which is $5,376. But when I look at the line, it doesn't seem to add up to me. So you said that would be under supplies, correct?
Let me double check to make sure I got that right. I do believe so. Let me pull that up.
Yes, supplies. And what the budget narrative does in this type of a format, it doesn't get into all the breathing costs, right? So what we point out is what is different, right? What is new. And any change from something that we were doing previously into something that we're going to do differently, i.e. Sean has some money in there to help advance the reading program at the elementary school, right? What we didn't talk about was that there's a chunk of money in there that we have to put in every year for the reading program K through 2, right? So it's the same thing with supplies. There's supplies that we buy every year. What we point out in the narrative is anything that's different. Because in New Hampshire in particular, we have to separate out what's new from the default budget. And so we're doing it through that lens so that you know the additional money that we're spending, you know, what value you're getting for that additional increase. So it doesn't mean, so when Dave says, oh, it's $5,000 more for copying, it could be that we saw that it was less money that we needed for some other supplies that we had been buying before, so they net out.
Okay.
Point out
Yeah,
what
Thank you, Susan. You definitely, you know, your handle is much firmer on that than me right now, the way that it's piled up. But yes, you know, the supplies, Scholar Supplies has the copier maintenance money, which has not been budgeted there in the past, but we have all the other general supplies there as well. So, you know, it's art supplies, English, social studies, band music, course, everything is in there. And there are changes, but the highlight of that, you know, that was the copier piece.
Okay.
Compared to prior years, so, yes.
Okay, can I just ask you on the purchase of the, and installation of the presentation station, that's a
Yes.
hard one to say.
I could not get it out.
How much is that gonna be? Is that fairly inexpensive?
I guess it depends on what you think is fairly inexpensive.
Right, sure.
For a presentation area, I actually think that it's an investment, and I know that Jason Carey will be presenting that as part of the tech piece, I believe,
okay.
Dr. Gibbons. So I'll let him give you the details on it.
Yeah, no, I love the idea. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, you know, it involves a screen. It involves, you know, having the long-lasting, proper type of, you know, I don't know if it's LED or whatever the tech specs are on it. but it's appropriate for this use and it would have long life. So
Yeah.
I think the cost, gets higher as you want it to last longer. But I'll
Right.
let him fill you in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Were there any other junior high, middle school questions?
Nope.
None here.
Okay, all right, so let me shuffle my notes back again, and so, so in talking about the high school, we know that, our enrollment is gonna go down, by, what do we have, 7 students, or it's 11? It looks
I think
like
it's
to
a
me,
typo
but-
there, it's 11.
Yeah, it's 11 students. And, we are continuing to think about and find ways to address some of the sort of lack of offerings or some other things that were identified last year going into this year's budget. So we're continuing to keep those in mind this year in our budgeting requests. Again, similar to the junior high, so the feedback and some of the reflection work that we did on Tuesday this week, has really sort of opened people's eyes to think about, possibilities for us in terms of, not just offerings for kids, but sort of getting kids to think about, what learning is. That learning isn't just about, knowledge that they acquire in the classroom, but it's about experiences, it's about exposure to opportunities, it's about connections to real life experiences, whether they're occupational or whether they're project-based, whether they are, just sort of immersive experiences for a period of time, or whether they're longer lasting. There's lots of places and ways that kids are going to be able to learn and experience the world as they prepare for life, really, as a graduate. And, that graduate lens is so important, making sure that we are thinking about the needs of our kids and recognizing that those needs are diverse, right? They run across a spectrum. We have a whole population here that we serve. And we have to do some work to really identify and drill down on, what is it that our kids are doing? What do they aspire to do? What are we presenting them with for information about the possibilities of what they can do and what's available to them? And then looking that sort of information about what it is that we're trying to work towards, making sure that our program supports them in getting there to the best of our ability, best we possibly can. And so, we can see that there's been work done in the past that's been shared with us and with me as a building principal and with our admin team. We've been working with our folks to sort of, when we can this year, to try to think about what we need to do, what data we need to look at, what resources we need to be able to sort of begin to build some of that infrastructure or improve on existing infrastructure to make that sort of stuff happen. So this budget this year really, does a few things. One, again, we haven't had a lot of time for that visioning piece and for making really sort of big changes in what we're doing. But we want to continue to support students in our elective offerings. We want to make sure that we are providing good opportunities for kids to take at Newmarket High School, so that they need to look less and less at other opportunities outside of our school. We want to be able to make sure that we are providing adequate resources and support for those new programs in place this year. We don't want to do a one-year thing and then have to cut them because we can't offer the supplies and materials that they need to keep those programs going. So you're going to see pieces in art, and you can also see there's been requests in music and in chorus and the instrumental side that we want to support. And we have a different vision emerging around our computer science program through our math department. So you'll see more materials in those areas as we look at that. And then also with regard to making sure that students really understand the opportunities and that we're seeking those opportunities out and presenting them in a fashion that they understand and that and hopefully that they see the value and then therefore want to take advantage of those opportunities. You'll see that coming through in some of the guidance restructuring that we're planning for next year. So that's sort of an overview, and I'll just sort of take a look at it with you as we go through it. So as I said, the enrollment's down slightly. We think that those numbers, are, first of all, that looks to be a one-year dip for me. Looking forward, we've got a bigger class going out than we have, and that's what happens. But these numbers are good because what happens is we'll continue to offer cores. Core sections are always offered based on the numbers of kids you have to put into those cores. So, those get determined during the scheduling process. So we regulate class size that way. So that's not going to be an issue. Whatever we don't need to support managing those class sizes, and in this case, we'll have more available staff to offer more sections of those desirable electives that kids want to take part in. So, we think that that's just it leads to better efficiency in scheduling and making schedules work for kids. I did want to say too that one of the things that was a bit of a theme during our day, and we have not processed this as a leadership team yet, but one of the things that struck me is that we still have work to do around our schedule. And I don't mean the scheduling process, but I mean the physical schedule. So that will be some work that we do as we head towards the spring in terms of thinking about, how we bring those classes to life for kids, what they look like, what the structure and what the timing of those classes will be. So staffing page, and what you see on the staffing is you'll see that we're requesting a half FTE in art. You'll see that we are also requesting a restoration of a position that apparently was at the high school in the past for a half-time ELO position. And my understanding is that at one time we had a full-time person in that role, and it was eliminated, and we'd like to at least take a step next year towards bringing back a half-time person in that area. Again, that's extended learning opportunities. And when we talk about extended learning opportunities, we're talking about everything that's related to school to work, school, career exploration, internship opportunities, work study, all of and more, running start, connecting kids with college pieces. There's all sorts of opportunities that fall within that ELO category. So I'm going to back up. We'll talk about art. So this year I had requested that we expand the art piece to help us schedule fully the basically junior, senior high school. They're tied to separate the two in talking about budget, but Unified Arts in particular has staff that get shared between both levels in the scheduling process. And this year, due to the COVID challenge, we had to change the schedule for middle school from high school. It didn't align with the high school, makes it harder to share staff. You start to run into conflicts in the schedule as you do that. And we really needed the extra art position to help us solve that puzzle. And it worked very well, at least for this first half so far this year. And the ripple effect back to the high school is that the more art we can provide, or my understanding is that the art position was at the middle school and now we're expanding the high school. To me, it sort of blends the two because we're using people as we need to on both sides of the building. But by adding art, we're giving more opportunities for kids to experience art fully at both levels. We're able to provide more electives at the high school level because we're providing more basic art, intro art, and other art projects to our junior high school kids, and more intro art to our 9th graders and 10th graders, expanding opportunities for juniors and seniors to do some of the high interest elective courses. So whether that be, Ms. Blake has a new stained glass class that subscribed to this year, and kids are very excited about, as an example. It also has a scheduling benefit, because by having that piece and the flexibility to expand art for all kids at the junior and senior high school, is that it helps unlock those pieces that can lead us to be able to talk about how much language can we offer at the middle school, because we have more sections at the high school of art where kids are sliding into, or just by increasing the number of elective sections in general, along with our decrease in enrollment, that expansion is going to allow for more elective types and numbers of sections to be offered for high school students. So that's a benefit. The other piece we highlighted on the salary FTE was the half-time transfer from the special ed counselor position over to the guidance department. Again, that way, I mentioned that in the junior high one, that's the corresponding move for the high school. Again, that's not a service loss, but it is sort of a redefining of the position. The position is a counseling position, and from my point of view, counseling it's not a special ed cert requirement. All of our counselors can work the way they do with regular ed students. Counseling is counseling, and by moving the person back, we're going to be able to talk about how the services can be and the student load for the counselors can be a little bit more distributed evenly among the whole department. Currently, right now, we have one high school counselor, we have one middle school counselor, and then we had that person who was working as a special ed counselor. By bringing that person back in, we can redistribute the load and the work that the counseling department has to do. We started to have those discussions with them. We have a vision for how that works. You add an EOLO position to that department as well, and now you have an opportunity for building a really solid communication and guidance program, counseling and guidance program for our students 9 through 12, so that they can really be informed about opportunities. They can have opportunities to answer questions. They should have the opportunity to put together more career and post-secondary awareness programs for kids, and quite frankly, just be more student-facing in terms of their delivery with kids. And so these two moves within that department will provide the staffing pieces we need to build that program out in a way that better services kids. Our operating goods and services, similar to the other budgets, again, we've seen modest increases really in the supplies and textbooks, software and equipment. We're seeing, you're seeing a little bit of a shift there in terms of textbook requests going down, but the digital resources requests going up as a function of, again, I think, really our PD and some of our teachers really getting on board with some of the newer technology. We do have new books being requested for our computer science program. They're looking at, again, we're looking at adopting some sort of a intro programming course within that, as opposed to sort of like a computer, like, we don't want it to be a keyboarding spreadsheet database kind of thing. Kids have learned that. It's integrated in a lot of programs, in a lot of the course content that they're as they do school, and most of the kids, quite frankly, are coming in with those skills before they ever get to us. but I think expanding that computer science piece to include more programming. We're looking at a number of different programs. There's an MIT program called Scratch that's been around for a while that provides opportunities for kids to learn programming at a very basic level. But we're including some supplies and requests to be able to cover a program, even though right now we're not sure exactly which program that will be. So right now we're talking about these Arduino kits, and so there are increases there. And then the equipment request, the other half of the request to install a presentation station would be the next biggest sort of increase in those lines for us. And the same question that came up about professional services and the maintenance and repairs things is also present in this budget as well. So, you know, overall, I just say that you know, we're just trying to continue to build on what's been started while we're sort of in a reflect and envision mode, maybe for the next year or so. So, you know, we're still moving forward in elective programming areas where we can. We're looking to these for students with the additions in our counseling department, particularly with the ELO request. We are still looking to expand some visual arts offerings for our kids, which should help the overall scheduling, in addition to providing those opportunities for our students. We're upgrading equipment in music and arts to go along with that. We're requesting the presentation station, all of these things. So you know, I'd say I don't want to say we're flat and just kind of holding even. We're not. We're moving forward with this budget. There's some forward-thinking work here, which is, you know, I think we should be proud of, especially given the fact that we're sitting here, you know, slogging through a COVID year and just trying to keep one foot in front of the other. There's some good work here. There's some good thinking here. Our teachers are excited to implement some new programming. I know that when we get our guidance, our counseling group together, and we get this position in place, and we put those pieces together, that work will benefit students in many ways, in all of our students. It'll help students who need that workplace experience. It will help our college and career, our college kids really learn about the programming, about the requirements for those schools, and about what they need to do to successfully get there. And it will help balance the loads so that students get more, so that our counseling department can deliver more student-facing experiences and give kids access to them. So yeah, that's what I've got for you. Happy to take questions.
I don't really have any.
Nope, it's a great presentation.
Thank you, David. There's none in the room. Amy, do you have any questions?
No.
Thanks, David, again.
Thank you,
that was-
David.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
you're
Dave.
welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your support. Much appreciated.
All right. Susan?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm so glad that our principals could join us tonight and share with you some important thoughts and planning and work we've been doing around how to move forward in ways that are meaningful, that won't be counterproductive when we do our visioning. So really excited to have support for the class sizes at the elementary school. And as you know, those of you who have been here since I arrived, we have been focusing on how to bolster our guidance counseling services for students. So these additions here will help dramatically to take us to the next level in that area. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
You
Thank you.
too. Thank
You too.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
So next week we will have Erica and Deb Dave, Cressy, Jason, on deck. So that should get us through the others. I think Jana's on vacation next week, so she'll walk us through perhaps the last evening, the 19th. She'll walk us through the revenue pieces and any other parts that I can't answer for you at our next meeting. So.
Great.
Sounds good.
Any other questions on the budget for this evening? None? Okay. Well, thanks for all of that. We had on our agenda as well, goals. Did everybody get the draft?
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
So, we've been here, for a while. Did, I feel fine. I've been living off of candy, Halloween, no vegetables since Sunday, and staying up late watching the news, but somehow I feel. What do people think about the draft? Thanks, Jana.
Thank you, Jenna.
I think they were good in terms of sort of conceptualizing and encapsulating all the stuff that we talked. We talked about a lot that night in terms of different, where our focus should be. Susan gave us some good input. I think, when we look at the policy evident there, since that is the thing that we can directly impact. And I think, when we look at board boarding and orientation, as well as having that annual calendar that Gary spoke to, I think that's another, process that we can get in place that hopefully will continue board so that as well as a policy. So I thought in that regard it was good, in those regards.
Yeah, I mean, I still, obviously I'd like to see the board have more insight into kind of the district and how things are going, but I understand there's not agreement on that. So I certainly think these are representative and adequate.
I think Gary, to your point, and, without mentioning, as a way to do that, I think it's an important thing, because I think it's it's a collective thing that we need to know about. I mean, are our policies getting good results? Are we getting a staff? And I think we certainly have been very, we've got now. So, but are we optimizing, our ability to hire and retain and keep happy
And
our staff?
do we understand why people leave? And, are there things we can do that by just having discussions, give the staff some additional feeling of support and to retain them. So, yeah.
Well, one thing I put in there is, make a copy of it, but is I think it was the second sentence, something to the effect that we would work. Oh, thank you, Kim. We would work collaboratively with the superintendent to come up with a way, and I think it's a good part of our annual assessment. I mean, that's one of the keys to an effective, make sure that your people are staying, that they're happy when they're here, and that they're professionally,
Oh, sure.
fulfilled.
Yeah, I see what you're.
That's what that is, and but I didn't want to, necessarily to a particular method. I mean,
Oh, yeah, sure.
It might be multiple. Like, I know we've started at, this is interesting. Have you work survey? It's a thing
No.
we do at my business, and it assesses, I think, a lot of it about just, your satisfaction on multiple areas. Professional development, feeling supported at work, feeling it's a safe environment to come into, things like that. There's an equivalent that superintendents will do for their schools. It's just, and it's to work on. You can find where the pain points are, and that was the idea for that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Amy, there's some goals you had sent. Are there any of those you wanted to look at
Well,
including?
Well, I just felt like, you know, with COVID happening, I think that, I mean, 3 goals that Mike, you had typed out. But in addition, I just think, you know, especially like we touched on it a couple times tonight, the COVID slide or whatever people are gonna call it from now on, the COVID effect, or I'm sure there'll be many other names for it in the future, but I just think that maybe as a board, we need to, you know, maybe look at, and some of the things I mentioned, is learning, you know, what effects has COVID had on our students and how we can address these issues in the near future. So, you know, like for number 3, on my list, I had 4 of them. And number 3 is support and evaluate long-term student learning and possible instructional and organizational inequities due to COVID-19. So just, that's where I'm coming, where I you know, I worry about students, like, maybe they didn't have the greatest Wi-Fi access, maybe they didn't have Wi-Fi. Families were facing hardships during the remote learning, and how that's all gonna play into their long-term learning. And so that's where I was thinking maybe that's something we could continue to monitor and evaluate, you know, the instructional learning piece on these students. So that's just maybe number 3, I would, out of all of them, out of the 4 that I mentioned. I don't know how anyone else feels about the goals that I mentioned. Anyone?
I almost think you
Have
could
any-
kind of combine 3 and 4, like the first part of 4 with 3, and because there may be impacts to teachers and stuff that we're just not thinking about. And
Right, true, right.
I would say also maybe a little bit of 2, when we look at, you know, the budgetary aspect,
yeah.
since budget is a core of our responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, with input from Susan and the admin team, like we did tonight, annual budget, you know, just how we can support the budget in response to COVID. Like, do we need to get more
like class sizes.
class sizes, or
Yeah.
the class size policy, or
Yeah,
do we
yeah.
need to get more Wi-Fi hotspots for people to borrow? You know, those type, be that specific about it, but just sort of maybe looking at it from that standpoint.
That's a great idea.
Amy, I thought all your goals were spot on, very humane, more immediate to what we're looking at, and I suspect, Susan, you have your, and it comes to mind with some of the stuff that we talked about tonight with budget, is that, you know, when we're done this year, you know, some of the restrictions, the pandemic restrictions start to lift, the challenge isn't over for school. You got to identify, and I think this is in part what some of the stuff you were getting at, Amy, with your goals, is we got to make sure things aren't kids into the cracks.
Exactly, yep.
So, and I suspect, you know, well, of course, the staff and the admin are very conscious and concerned about that as well. And so this is sort of, you know, maybe a combined type of effort here, you know, that we sort of, we have a report on this, if you will, on these very valid concerns going forward. Susan, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it just, and we're getting these reports anyways, but really, you know, so we understand as a board and then as a community, what we're seeing and what may need to be done to get kids what they need.
I have not seen goals, so I can't really speak to it.
I didn't, all right, I didn't CC you, that's why. Sorry, Susan, I'll send them to you.
I can send them to you right now, Susan, if you want. Not that you need to read them right now, but.
May I suggest this? That if folks are fine with the 3 goals, and if we need to wordsmith that, but if we're fine with the concepts, then maybe we come back next week, you know, having given more thought to Amy and has an opportunity to read them, that we finalize this.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
That sounds good to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Great.
sounds fun.
Amy, you gonna send those to Susan?
I sent them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Business tonight.
Yeah, there's something, and I know it's late, and so I'm a little hesitant to bring it up. I've been kind of concerned with, and I felt I should address it with the board. And it kind of has to do with communication/policies. 2 weeks ago, we basically had a request for a policy variance. I didn't realize it was I guess we did, the board as a whole didn't get that request until Monday. I'm not sure what day, but it was, anyways, it was later than I think maybe it should have been. Difficult because if a variance request comes in, does it come to the board? Does it go? So that kind of bothered me. And then last week, didn't catch it at the time, but when we read the public comments, there were some sections that were redacted. And I understand it's, you know, in the policy can basically restrict comments based on them being on the agenda. However, had someone been here in person, and I mean, the comments that were redacted were not particularly helpful. So I don't think, you know, they really would have benefited, but I don't know if that person was okay with that, contacted them or not. So I was a little concerned that it was kind of a unilateral decision where been here live, we could have decided as a board whether or not to hear their comments. So I was a little concerned with that. And I know by the letter of the policy, I think we followed it, but you know, it seems like especially during this time of COVID, and we're asking people not to come here to speak live, maybe we should have a little more broad acceptance of people's comments. Hopefully they're.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Gary. I think in that thing in particular, that the statement that I read, the lengthy statement, there were a couple issues. There was one issue at the end that wasn't germane to anything on our.
Agreed.
Okay, but there was also some personal attacks that weren't germane either. And you know, I realized that if somebody was here and said that, they're gonna get it out. But come here and say it, or get on the TV and say it. I'm not gonna read that.
Sure. Well, I mean, we haven't been publicizing that,
No, but I
the
mean-
address to the URL to be on the, but no, I mean, it's a fair point.
There is, but you know, look, if the board wants to vote and that we read that stuff that's extraneous, so be it. We'll go with the pleasure of the entire board. But I ain't gonna read it on my own. You know, if somebody wants to make a comment like that,
Sure.
they can step up and do it on their own. Happy to read other stuff and happy to put stuff on agendas if people want, and certainly will read stuff germane to topics on the agenda, but.
And to be honest, had the board voted, I would not have voted to include that stuff. I
Yeah.
would, you know,
Yeah.
but it's a question of whether it is the board's purview to make that decision, I guess is what my concern is.
Yes, but it's kind of awkward, and it's open for discussion. How do you do that without meeting? to
Sure.
do it, you
Sure.
know? I mean, it's sort of like if you take your analog and somebody's here and they start to stray off an agenda item, I would typically, unless it's like they're out and, you know, just taking a 90-degree turn, I chair, you have the discretion to kind of let it go or not. And that's what I would do. So that's the analog. I made that discretion.
Yeah.
Because it clearly wasn't on the agenda.
No, it was not useful at all,
Yeah.
clearly.
So, I mean, but I'm not wedded to this, but it's just, I don't know how we would do it a different way. Because if we start communicating outside of a meeting as to what, you know, we're gonna redact this, that's a meeting, and that violates 91, you know, the.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I think
the
we
right
would probably
to
have to
know.
decide at the meeting, I suppose.
Yep.
Or if it's something that's maybe germane to school functions, but that isn't on the agenda.
Yeah, you know, if I may, to your first point, Gary, about the request, I did call all the board members about that, and, you know, maybe I wasn't as crystal clear as I thought I was being. but that was
Yeah, I
my-
didn't understand it, but
Yeah, that was my intent with calling around, but yours is a fair point, and it's well taken. I'll
thanks. I
turn
appreciate
those
that.
around. Yep. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
Do we want to go into non-public?
We need to for
Well, we need
one,
the
but-
manifest, Mike?
Oh, we need them to do the manifest too. We need to talk about, this.
Let me quickly make a motion to approve manifests for November 5th, 2020 totaling $133,680.41.
I second that motion.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 That's unanimous. And Elizabeth's not here tonight. She could not make this meeting. Just bear with me for a second.
Mm-hmm. Kim, is that something that Amy needs as well?
No, she was on the, no, she was on, we had a meeting with the NTA yesterday, the MOU. No, I don't really have enough copy. Yes, I can. 133,680.41.
Sarah, feel free to throw things at me, Sarah, if you need me to speak up.
I'd like to seek a motion to go into non-public pursuant to 91A, Roman 2, sections A and C.
So moved.
Seconded.
By roll call vote, Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Kennison's an aye. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Tilton.
Aye.
Okay, we are in non-public. It's 10 of 8.
10 of 9, actually, unfortunately.